Welcome Wargamers, this is Doug with 2 Plus Tough, and today we are going to be exploring and diving into the Fyreslayer Start Collecting box. This video was requested by several of you. I'm going to put some names up here, but there are more. This is the last of the current Start Collecting boxes, and we just got word of a leaked image that there's 2 more for Keratin Overlords and Stormcast Eternals coming out real soon, so we'll dive into those almost immediately. But getting back to the Fyreslayers kit, there's actually a good reason why I held off to do this one last, and that is simply because I don't understand this army. I think it's beautiful, it's gorgeous on the tabletop, it seems to be doing very well competitive lately, but the models you get in this box, I struggle to see kind of their synergy and how to build forward, and so what I wanted to do was get a real educated opinion before I just sit here and spout nonsense. That all being out of the way, let's go ahead and dig into the contents of the box, and what a box it is. So you get 1 Magmadroth kit, as well as 10 Berserkers. Now this is a bit deceptive at first, because you may think easily if you're new to the game, this is really just 11 models, right? You get the Magmadroth dude and then 10 guys to go with him, but the truth of the matter is, this Magmadroth kit builds 3 heroes in a variety of ways. Essentially, you put 1 on the Magmadroth, and the other 2 walk on foot. When you account for all of the weapon varieties and options in this box, you have 13 different ways to build it. It's really quite extensive. Now, what I can tell you on the surface is that having 3 heroes come in a Start Collecting box is very, very heavy in points. You're probably not going to use all 3 of them in your earliest games, but they are great in their own capacity. And I can tell you that Berserkers are going to be the bread and butter of this army, so that is great to have them. So normally at this point in the Start Collecting box reviews, I would go unit by unit and dive into the real meat of the rules and how these units play on the tabletop. However, as I said before, I struggle to see the synergies and combinations in this box and which way you should build it because, like I said earlier, there are so many options. To that end, I knew of another YouTuber whose channel is TellTaleNoob Does Gaming, and I know that he's a Fyreslayer player. He has a very extensive tactica series on the Fyreslayers, and so I asked him to come in and do a little guest speaking on the Fyreslayers. Before I let him take over, what I'm going to say is, if you have any interest in this army whatsoever, go ahead over to his channel, which will be in the show notes down below. Click subscribe and really dive into his Tactica series. It's like 12 plus videos on everything from allies to all the things you got in the GHB. Everything that you wanted to know about this army is in there, and great discussions are had. And with that being said, I'll let TellTaleNoob take it away.
What's up guys, this is TellTaleNoob, and I really like to thank Doug for letting me come on his show and talk with you for just a few minutes about the Fyreslayers, who are near and dear to my heart, as anybody who knows me can tell you. Now, hopefully I don't lose too many subscribers while I babble on for a few minutes here, but I wanted to address just the vast amount of flexibility this box brings us. Now, in the Start Collecting box, on the front it says it comes with 13 miniatures, and that's true. You can make 13 miniatures. You get 2 heroes on foot, 1 riding the big lizard, and you get 10 Volkite Berserkers. Those Berserkers are your battle line, the other 3 are heroes, leaders, whatever you want to call them. However, each one of them has different roles, and depending on how you build them, will fill a specific portion of your list. So there is a lot more flexibility inside of just 13 models, and it doesn't become apparent immediately. Now, depending on who goes on the big lizard, you're going to get somewhere between 480 and 540 points out of this box. And the options are just incredible. So you could put a Runefather on the Magmadroth, or you can put the Runefather on foot. So that's 2. You can put the Runeson on Magmadroth, who has 2 different weapon options, being the Wyrmslayer Javelin or the Ancestral War Axe. Personally, I prefer the Javelin. It's a ranged attack that rends. It's only 1 ranged attack, whereas he has 3 in melee with his Ancestral War Axe, but it lacks rend. The Javelin does D3 wounds from 12 inches out, and it also does extra wounds if it damages a monster. I think it's a winner. I didn't think so before, but I've been sold on it, so I like that flexibility that we have here. Now we also have the Rune Sun on foot, and he also has either the Javelin or the Ancestral War Axe option. That's pretty cool. And they both do different things. They have different command abilities. The Rune Smiter can be put on a Magmadroth, or he can be put on foot. And he also comes with different options as far as how you load him out. He can be given an extra melee profile, which is horrible. I wouldn't recommend that. Or he can be given a Forge Key. and that's going to affect one of his abilities that we'll talk about in a few minutes. And I always give him the key because it doubles the range, and the ability is really good. Now you also get Volkite Berserkers. And these Volkite Berserkers can be loaded out in a few different ways. You can give them double hand axes, which allows them to reroll hits, and they become really good at murdering infantry with a 5-up, 6-up armor save, maybe even 4-up, depending, because they just put out so many wounds. They can be given an axe and a shield, which I'm starting to like a little bit more. They have the potential to deal mortal wounds when they charge. They have a better save in melee when they don't charge, and they still hit and wound a little bit better than the war picks. But you have the war pick and shield option as well. And the nice thing about the war picks is even though they're a little less accurate, the axes hit on a 4, wound on a 3. The picks hit on 4 and wound on 4, but they also rend. So I think ideally, if you're taking a Fyreslayer's list, I want to have, more than likely, one of each of those units in my list. But that gives us 13 total options out of the Start Collecting box. So I think it really comes down to, you have to ask yourself, what kind of list, what kind of army am I wanting to play here? And that's going to give you some answers. Now, as far as the best options in my opinion, I think the Runeson on Magmadroth with the Wormslayer Javelin is the best. His command ability is absolutely brilliant. It's a 10-inch bubble, which you can make 16 by giving him the Obsidian Coronet artifact, and it allows friendly Fyreslayers to roll 3 dice, drop the low, and they charge. And this pairs beautifully with Volkite Berserkers, who, by the way, just dropped 5 points from the First General's Handbook to 2017. So they are very cheap right now. They are very, 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 very good. But he's probably my top option. I want him to be a support character. I'm going to give him Exemplar of the Ancestors. He has that nice big base. He can cover a decent portion of the army with Battle Shock immunity. He does mortal wounds at range. He can get in combat if he absolutely has to, but he folds like a wet paper towel as soon as he gets hit with anything legitimate. None of our heroes have a save after save except for one kind of, and it's tied to his command ability. So most of our heroes are very squishy. So I want my guys to stay back. I don't want to be tempted to bring him forward. And if you give him the Ancestral War Axe, you're losing out on potential attacks because he's not going to be in combat the entire game. But because of his command ability, and I like to play aggressively, he's the top option. Now for me, because of the aggression, that means the Rune Smiter is the second best option in my mind. The Rune Smiter has 2 really good abilities. One is called Runic Empowerment, and this is where that Forge Key comes into play instead of his second melee profile. The Forge Key allows him to reach out to a unit within 20 inches, and they can reroll all their failed to wound rolls. That's really good. Do not underestimate how powerful that can be. And he also has an ability that doesn't go off in the hero phase. It comes in the movement phase, but he can tunnel a unit of Fyreslayers up the field. He has to be 9 inches away from the enemy, but this gives you a lot of range. And I think you can see where the synergy is here, because the Runeson on Magmadroth can pop his command ability and run up, catch these units who just popped halfway up the field underneath his command ability, so now they get to roll 3d6 on the charge, drop the low. And Volkite Berserkers, if that's what you brought in, have an extra ability that allows them to re-roll 1 dice, so they actually, theoretically, get 4 chances at top dice when they plop down and charge. That's really good. So he's a very aggressive general, and the Rune Smiter fits in perfectly there. However, because he comes out in the movement phase, he cannot do Runic Empowerment and tunnel a unit up in the same turn. So you're losing out on a little bit there. But you can make up for that with the Rune Smiter on Magmadroth. The Rune Smiter on Magmadroth has a once per game ability that does the Runic Empowerment, which is reroll failed to wound rolls, and it affects everything within 10 inches of him. So now you can have the Rune Sun and a Rune Smiter on Magmadroth. The Rune Sun command ability goes off, the Rune Smiter once per game ability goes off, and they just charge up the field. You tunnel a unit up next to them, and they charge into the enemy, and now they're re-rolling failed to wound rolls. They're charging 4d6, drop the lowest 2. Basically, it's absolutely disgusting. And you add that in with just the general survivability of your Fyreslayers. It's just, there's so much here. But I want to be very basic, so let's keep moving on. So those are my top 3 options, and I like every single one of them, especially in aggressive lists. But I'm not going to discount the Runefather on foot. His command ability is very cool. His command ability is he can pass off wounds and mortal wounds to friendly units after he's made his save attempts on a 4+. So he gets his armor save. He gets now to make another save to pass off the wound, which gives him a pseudo mortal wound ignoring roll. That goes to the unit. The unit can now take their invulnerable save against it. It makes a very hard general to kill. And I like my generals to have about 10 wounds apiece. He fits the bill. He's got 6. He can pass off half of those wounds, so theoretically it's about 10 to 12. He's very good. And he also allows pile-in, which you can abuse, and I'm going to show you in just a minute how an army with him as my general would probably look. After that, though, I think it drops off pretty steeply. So you've got your Rune Sun on Magmadroth with the Ancestral War Axe. He still has a great command ability. He just doesn't support the army very well because he can't attack over his guys in the front ranks with that Javelin. The Ancestral War Axe, I think, is very poor. You have the Rune Father on Magmadroth. His command ability is weird. 20-inch range. You can reroll failed ones on armor saves, and you can also reroll failed battle shocks. We have a trait that's just better because it's immunity to battle shock, and we also have another hero called a Battlesmith who rerolls all failed armor saves. We have things that can cover that ability, and he's also 260 points, the most expensive option. I don't like him as much. Now, we have the 2 Rune Suns on foot. I think they're probably the bottom options, but they're kind of dark horses. You need to build around them, and you have to have a specific thing in mind that you want to do in a specific meta that you're fighting against. And that brings me to who are the best generals. So, in an aggressive list, your Rune Sun on Magmadroth is probably your best bet. Charging up the way he can get things charging, he can average 9 to 10 inches pretty much all the time with his command ability, is absolutely fantastic. You're seeing a lot of lists that had the Rune Sun on Magmadroth as the general. You have 2 or 3 Rune Smiters bringing up key units, maybe dropping a Battlesmith up the field so that you can then next turn start getting the buff from the Battlesmith. It's pretty nasty. You're going to hit the opponent in their deployment zone first turn, and they're not going to be able to do much about it. So Rune Sun on Magmadroth is probably the best aggressive list inside of the Fyreslayer force. Now you have a grindy counterattack option that you can take here. And it's a Rune Father on foot because he gives you 5 inches instead of 3 for pile-in. But you have another ability here. It's called Fury of the Fyreslayers. It's a command trait that actually adds an additional 3. So now, anything within 6 inches of the general, you give him the Obsidian Coronet or Exemplar of the Ancestors. Obsidian Coronet makes it plus 6 inches on his command ability. So now within 12 inches, you're now piling in 8 inches. That's huge. So you can really cover the board. If you're in a meta with a lot of things that teleport down, try to hit you first turn, Vanguard Wings and the like, you now have a list that can spread throughout the deployment zone, deny all of the objectives and everything else to the enemy's army, and if they hit you really quick, your guys are counterattacking with legitimate force. So he is very, very good. But he's a very specific list, and you have to kind of build around him a little bit more. Now, he's your counterattacking list. It just gets oodles of models into combat. There's a different option here. Now, the Rune Sun on foot, I didn't go over his command ability just yet, but I'm going to go over it really quick here. It's called Dauntless Assault. It's a 15-inch range, and it basically grants any Fyreslayer unit friendly within that 15-inch range the runic empowerment ability from the Rune Smiter against enemies with a wound characteristic of 3 or higher. Very, very, very cool. Now, that means you don't need as many Rune Smiters. You can put in other support heroes. You can bring in maybe some Lord Relictors. You can bring in Knight Azeros. And you don't have to worry about having so many Smiters on the board because this guy is giving you runic empowerment more often. However, he is very squishy. He's got 5 wounds with a 4+ save. And if he dies, he's died. He's gone. He can't save himself. At least the Rune Father on foot can theoretically double the amount of wounds he has, and the Rune Sun on Magmadroth has 12 with a 4+ armor save. Those guys are very survivable on their own. The Rune Sun on foot really isn't, but I've seen some lists that have this grinding, punchy lists that are really, really good, and they're excellent against things like Maggotkin Blight Cyst, where every single model is proccing off the Rune Sun's reroll failed to wound rolls, and just dealing obscene amounts of damage. So it really depends on what kind of list you foresee yourself wanting to play. There is no right answer here. It's meta dependent, it's personal preference and playstyle dependent. You might like the idea of the Rune Father on the Magmadroth. I can't argue with that, but me personally, the top 3 generals easily are the Rune Son on Magmadroth, the Rune Father on foot, and barring that, the Rune Son on foot. Both of the Rune Sons, I give them the Wyrmslayer Javelin. Guys, I really appreciate, again, Doug letting me come onto the show, talk to you guys for just a few moments here, and I'm going to turn it right back over to him because I'm sure you're sick of hearing my voice at this point. TellTaleNoob out.
All right, thank you so much for that. Like I said, go over and check out his channel in the show notes down below. He has a great Tactica series on the Fyreslayers, and recently he did a poll to see what Tactica series is going to happen next, and he picked the Maggotkin of Nurgle, which I have absolutely been loving. And wrapping up that video, we've discussed the different ways to build the box, some merits to each of the different types of leaders that you can build, and kind of setting yourself up for the different play styles. And folks, that is just about everything that we can collectively put into the Fyreslayer's Start Collecting box. And if you have a question about Age of Sigmar lore, gameplay, or a review that you'd like to have done, go ahead, click subscribe, and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single comment and respond to as many of them as possible, always using them as inspiration for future videos. If you'd like to support my channel in a more personal way, you can head over to the 2+ Tough store and check out this line of gaming mats that we have set in the realm of death. Perfect for the Malign Vorten's campaign coming up. I only made a limited run of these. I was going to make more, but shipping is kind of a hassle, so I decided to nix that. I have just over 100 of these in stock, so when they're gone, they are gone for good. They are $70 shipped in the US, and with them you also get my eternal gratitude. And if you can't do that, that's perfectly fine. I'm just so glad that you spent some time with me and TellTaleNoob here today. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.